2. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a conflict that many of us remember, but whose origins are far more complex than they first appeared. The 1991 Gulf War. We're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden history behind America's involvement. It wasn't just about a simple invasion, it was a story of oil, debt, shifting alliances, and a crucial diplomatic misunderstanding that set the stage for war. Let's set the scene. The 1980s. The Middle East is dominated by the brutal 8-year-long Iran-Iraq War. On one side, you have Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran, and on the other, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Now, who was backing Saddam? Believe it or not, the United States, along with many of its allies and neighbors in the Gulf, like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Why? The simple answer is the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Washington saw post-revolutionary Iran as the bigger threat to regional stability and the global oil supply. So, they provided Iraq with intelligence, economic aid, and military support to prevent an Iranian victory. Kuwait, a tiny but incredibly wealthy neighbor, was also terrified of Iran. So, they became one of Iraq's biggest financial backers, loaning Saddam billions and billions of dollars to fund his war machine. From their perspective, they were paying for Iraq to be a buffer state, protecting them from the revolutionary ambitions of Iran. For 8 years, this arrangement helped Saddam was seen, if not as a friend, then as a necessary partner in containing Iran. But then, in 1988, the Iran-Iraq War ended in a stalemate. And this is where the real trouble begins. Iraq was devastated. The country was in ruins. Its population was exhausted, and most importantly, it was drowning in debt. We're talking an estimated $80 billion. A huge chunk of that, about $14 billion, was owed to Kuwait. Saddam Hussein, a man who saw himself as the leader of the Arab world, a modern-day Nebuchadnezzar, was in a desperate position. Who had just fought a war he believed was on behalf of all his Arab neighbors, especially Kuwait. He felt he had protected them. So, in his mind, he shouldn't have to pay back that $14 billion. He saw it not as a loan, but as a payment for services rendered. He began to pressure Kuwait, demanding they forgive the debt. But Kuwait refused. From their perspective, a loan is a loan. Business is business. To make matters worse, another major issue was bubbling to the surface. Oil. OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, had production quotas for each member to keep oil prices stable. But Kuwait, wanting to maximize its own revenue, was allegedly overproducing oil. This drove the global price of oil down. For a country like Iraq, whose entire economy depended on oil revenue, this was catastrophic. Every dollar the price of oil dropped cost Iraq an estimated $1 billion a year in revenue. Saddam accused Kuwait of waging economic warfare against him. He claimed they were stealing Iraqi oil through a technique called slant drilling, tapping into the Rumaila oil field which straddled the Iraq-Kuwait border. While there was some truth to the slant drilling claim, it was a relatively minor issue. The real damage was from the depressed oil prices. So you have this perfect storm brewing. Saddam is broke, angry, and feels betrayed by the very people he thought he was protecting. He sees Kuwait's refusal to forgive the debt and their oil overproduction as a direct attack on Iraq's survival. He begins to mass troops on the Kuwaiti border throughout July 1990, making increasingly aggressive threats. This is the critical moment where American diplomacy comes into play, and where one of the most controversial conversations in modern history takes place. On July 25, 1990, just a week before the invasion, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie, had a meeting with Saddam Hussein. The official transcript of this meeting has been debated for decades. 2. According to the Iraqi version, which Saddam's government released. Ambassador Glaspie told him, "We have no opinion on your Arab-Arab conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait." Saddam, a dictator who sees the world in terms of green lights and red lights, likely interpreted this as a green light. He heard that the United States would not get involved in a dispute between Iraq and Kuwait. He believed he had America's implicit permission to resolve his border disagreement as he saw fit. Now, the U.S. State Department has always disputed this interpretation. They argue that Glaspier's comments were taken out of context and that she also warned Saddam against using force. But whether it was a misunderstanding, a calculated ambiguity, or a colossal diplomatic blunder, the message Saddam received was clear. America would stay out of it. He felt emboldened. He thought he could invade Kuwait, solve his financial problems in one fell swoop, and the world, particularly the US, would just look the other way. 7 days later, on August 2, 1990, Iraqi tanks rolled across the border. They overran Kuwait in a matter of hours. Saddam declared Kuwait the 19th province of Iraq and had his problem solved. He controlled Kuwait's vast oil reserves and erased his multi-billion-dollar debt. He expected the world to grumble, but ultimately accept this new reality. He was dead wrong. The international reaction was swift and furious. The invasion wasn't just a border dispute, it was the complete annexation of a sovereign United Nations member state. This was a line that couldn't be crossed in the post-World War II era. But for the United States, the stakes were even higher. Saddam now controlled a massive percentage of the world's proven oil reserves. And right next door was the biggest prize of all: Saudi Arabia. American intelligence and President George H.W. Bush's administration were terrified that Saddam wouldn't stop at Kuwait. His massive army was now sitting on the Saudi border. If he invaded and captured the Saudi oil fields, he would have a stranglehold on the global economy, who would be able to dictate oil prices to the entire world, holding industrial nations hostage. This was the red line for Washington. It was never just about liberating Kuwait. It was about protecting Saudi Arabia and the global flow of oil. This is what triggered Operation Desert Shield. President Bush declared, "This will not stand," and began a massive deployment of American and coalition forces to Saudi Arabia to defend the kingdom and deter any further aggression from Iraq. For months, the world watched as the US built up a massive international coalition, secured UN Security Council resolutions, and issued an ultimatum: get out of Kuwait by January 15, 1991, or face military force. Saddam, still believing the West didn't have the stomach for a real fight, called their bluff. He dug in, boasting of the mother of all battles. He was mistaken. On January 17, 1991, Operation Desert Storm began. A relentless air campaign pulverized Iraqi military infrastructure for weeks, followed by a ground war that lasted only 100 hours. The Iraqi army, once feared as the fourth largest in the world, was completely routed. Kuwait was liberated. So, when we look back, the Gulf War wasn't a simple story of good versus evil. It was the explosive climax of a decade of complicated relationships. It was a story of a war that left a nation in debt, a dictator who felt betrayed, a dispute over oil prices that was seen as economic warfare, and a critical diplomatic signal that was tragically misread. The American involvement, while publicly framed as the liberation of a small nation, was fundamentally driven by the strategic imperative to protect the global oil supply and prevent one man from gaining control over the world's economic lifeline. It's a powerful lesson in how history, economics, and diplomacy can collide with world-altering consequences. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this deep dive interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.